You're listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Bob Keane. I'm the editor-in-chief of the internationally recognized journal Fire Ecology, which is put together by Springer and hosted by the Association of Fire Ecologists. Today, we're talking about a very interesting paper titled Modeling Spatial Patterns of Longleaf Pine Needle Dispersal Using Long-Term Data. And we have two special people here today, Jeff Cannon and Doug Aubrey, here to tell you about it. Jeff, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jeff Cannon. I'm a landscape ecologist at the Jones Center at Itchaway. Thanks for having me.
And Doug, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Doug Aubrey. I'm a forest ecophysiologist with the University of Georgia. I have a joint appointment between the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources and the Savannah River Ecology Lab.
Well, welcome you two, and I really appreciate the time you're taking to go ahead and tell us about this incredibly interesting paper. Jeff, can you give us the elevator speech about the paper? What's this paper all about?
Sure. So this was a study. We know that prescribed fire is really important for shaping the structure and managing a lot of fire-maintained forest in the U.S. and throughout the globe. And so we understood that fire can change, the effects and the behavior of fire can change at really fine spatial scales, but it's pretty hard to predict. A lot of that's driven by fuels, and it's hard to predict what fuels you'll find where. So we wanted to do a study to try to better predict the litter component, the leaf litter component in a pine forest to help understand how fire might move through forests under different management scenarios, or what kind of effects you might see from different kinds of burns. So we took a long-term data set of leaf litter collection and then tried to predict on the surface how fuel changes at the scale of just a couple of meters.
It's a really, really important paper because, fire behavior is dictated by fuels, and the distribution of fuels really dictates where and when the fire will go. So it's an incredibly important paper. One of the things that's important about it is the amount of field work or the data collection that was involved in this effort. Doug, can you tell us about the data collection efforts?
Sure, Bob. We're really beneficiaries of a lot of field work that went into this because it had all been done before we had the idea to ask these questions. So back in 2010 or 2011, Bob Mitchell, who was a forest ecologist at the Jones Center, he and other scientists at the center put together some long-term monitoring plots with a variety of different questions that they had in mind to address. But one of the things that they were collecting was, long-term patterns of productivity. And to do that, you want to make sure that you capture leaf litter. And so they had 108 leaf litter traps that were about a quarter meter squared, put out across 8 different 4-hectare plots, and continued to monitor these collections multiple times throughout the year to get those annual litter fluxes. And that was very much Bob Mitchell's approach to science, was very much to address questions with overwhelming force. And we were really beneficiaries of that, right? So these data were around for the taking, and Jeff kind of came up with the questions and saw the value of being able to address those questions with this data set.
Yeah, I've been a part of a lot of litter collection studies, and I will tell you, I was very impressed with the effort involved in getting the litter fall data. With that data, Jeff, you were able to do a lot of spatial statistical modeling and find out what the data can tell you about how fuel lands on the ground. You want to summarize those findings?
Sure. So we used a neighborhood approach. So what that means is we essentially modeled individual tree production of litter. So an individual tree is going to produce more or less litter based on its size and its age. And also, depending on how many trees are around a given spot, you should be able to predict how much litter should fall there based on the sum of what falls from the trees around it. Of course, a lot of litter falls immediately beneath the tree, and then that sort of tapers off as you get far away. So you can kind of imagine every single tree has almost a bell-shaped curve over it called a litter kernel of where that litter falls. And you can overlap a lot of those and estimate how much litter should fall there. And this is a really flexible approach because we use that to model leaf litter in our forest, but because they're individual trees and we know their sizes, you can use it to predict forest leaf litter in lots of other forest types. And this becomes really important when you're thinking about manipulating tree density or changing composition or trying to manipulate for more complex structure. You really want to be able to predict leaf litter from individual trees so that you can understand how leaf litter is going to change in lots lots of different scenarios. We incorporated a couple of things. We imagined that leaf litter increases with tree size and that it might be changed a little bit by wind speed. So we pulled in lots of data on tree size and wind speed and had really detailed maps, luckily. And measuring every single tree may seem impractical, but with methods like aerial LiDAR and terrestrial LiDAR and these other methods, we can get pretty precise stem maps of all kinds of forests. So this is helpful for maybe modeling what leaf litter might be like in real time, but it's also useful for making predictions and helping to gauge different management scenarios as well.
Very good. So what are the implications of the study, Doug, then? What do you think these models and findings can be used for?
Yeah, in a lot of different areas of forest ecology in the Southeast and in other locations across the North America and the world, we have a really good understanding of simplified forests, right? Plantation forests, things that have continuous canopies. And in those types of situations, there's not a lot of variation in where the litter falls. But when we get into these more complex canopy structures, like Jeff mentioned, it gets to be much more important to understand those processes. You started off in putting this in the context of understanding fire and how this can be linked to fire models. And litter fall for the Southeast, that is the primary fuel for fires, and understanding its continuity is critical. And so this gives us a tool to be able to make those predictions and hopefully be able to feed those into current modeling efforts, trying to understand fire behavior and fire effects, as well as future models that are coming down the pipeline, because that is an area right now that is just really exploding with the technology at this point. Aside from fire, there's still other important implications for this work. One of them would have to do with the restoration of longleaf pine ecosystems across the landscape, for example. A lot of land managers want to transition from either a loblolly pine stand or perhaps a slash pine stand and try to bring in an understory of longleaf and then perpetuate that. And you're not going to be able to maintain that key part of the management of that ecosystem, which is prescribed fire, if you don't have continuity of fuels. And so this is a tool to be able to help understand, or could be applied to help understand, the continuity of fuels and restoration of that type of ecosystem.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what, I wish the three of us could meet down here at my local coffee shop, because I have so many questions about this study. It's such an interesting one. And the only way I'm going to find out about it is, guess what? I'm going to go back and read it again. So I want to thank you two for being on this podcast. Jeff, is there anyone you want to acknowledge or any funding source you want to acknowledge?
Yeah, of course. First and foremost, Susie Blades, who led this paper. Susie was a master's student who recently graduated. She was co-advised by Doug and I, did a terrific job, and worked with Susie a long time, including during her undergraduate. And so she's been a terrific student and helped make this a really great paper. The other person to acknowledge, like Doug said, is Bob Mitchell, and then lots and lots of people at the Jones Center who collected this painstaking data over a decade, almost all of it before I ever came along and peeked at the data. So the Jones Center, of course, for providing all the support and long-term investment in doing this project.
Very good. Again, thank you both, Doug and Jeff, for coming on the Fire Ecology Chats and chatting about your paper with us. For those of you who are listening, if you want to hear more about the paper is available for free at the Fire Ecology website hosted by Springer. Please go there, download it, and I'll buy it. You can have it all for you want and find out all about this unique study. Thank you again, Jeff and Doug, and we'll see everybody on the next podcast. Thank you so much.